All right. Good evening, friends. Welcome to Current Affairs Analysis, the Indian Express, presented by Genesis Civil Services Learning Hub. And today's date is 21st November 2023. All right. Today's topics are anticipatory bail Supreme Court verdict, Ukrain crisis and its implications, UAPA Jammu Kashmir journalist bail, Governor's role in passing bills and Supreme Court's stand, RBI's tightening of lending norms, GDP growth decline, Goldman Sachs report. Okay, let's start the lesson. Courts can give limited pre-arrest bail in FIRs from outside state, Supreme Court verdict, in only exceptional and compelling circumstances only. Now, this is a very interesting case. Let us look at this in a more detailed background of this case. The case involved a matrimonial dispute where the husband received anticipatory bail from Karnataka Sessions Court for an FIR filed in Rajasthan. Now, what is the court's directive? The Supreme Court emphasized the importance of the safeguarding citizens' fundamental rights, especially the right to life and personal liberty. So, Supreme Court is focused on two fundamental rights of the citizen. First is right to life and personal liberty. ये दो जो rights है वो violate नहीं होना चाहिए. It allowed for the limited anticipatory bail in FIRs registered outside the territorial jurisdiction of the court. That means, in this case, where is the anticipatory bail application? कहाँ पे किया है? यहाँ पे कर्नाटका सेशंस कोर्ट में एंटीसिपेटरी बेल एप्लीकेशन हस्बैंड ने किया है और FIR कहाँ पे फाइल हुआ है? राजस्थान में. बट स्टिल द हस्बैंड गॉट द बेल एंटीसिपेटरी बेल इन कर्नाटका स्टेट. अभी राजस्थान का जो jurisdiction है, that is nowhere near Karnataka Session Court, but still Supreme Court said that Karnataka Sessions Court can give the anticipatory bail. Okay. Now, what are the conditions for granting the bail? Now, there are certain conditions under which the anticipatory bail can be granted. Limited anticipatory bail can be granted under Section 438 of the CRPC, that is Criminal Procedure Code, by High Courts, Session Courts only in very rare and exceptional circumstances. An absolute bar on jurisdiction might unjustly affect genuine applicants facing wrongful or politically motivated prosecution. So, if there is a wrongful politically motivated prosecution against a person, that person can get the anticipatory bail from another state or another jurisdiction, even where the FIR is not filed in that particular jurisdiction. Alright, so stipulations for interim protection. Now, what are the stipulations for the interim protections? The notice must be served to the investigating officer and the public prosecutor involved in the फर्स्ट हियरिंग डेट. तो जो भी इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग ऑफिसर है और पब्लिक प्रोसिक्यूटर है उनको तो इन्फॉर्मेशन ये होना चाहिए. द कोर्ट हैज़ डिस्क्रिशन टू ग्रांट द इंटरिम एंटीसिपेटरी बेल इन सुटेबल केसेस. द कोर्ट मस्ट रिकॉर्ड द रीजंस फॉर द एप्लीकेंट्स फियर ऑफ इंटरस्टेट अरेस्ट एंड हाउ द प्रोटेक्शन अफेक्ट्स द इन्वेस्टिगेशन. तो वो एप्लीकेंट ने बताना चाहिए कि व्हाट इज़ द रीज़न आई एम नॉट कमिंग टू दैट जुरिस्डिक्शन. व्हाट इज़ द रीज़न? इज समवन थ्रेटनिंग योर लाइफ? If that is the case, then he can apply that anticipatory bail from other jurisdiction where he feels safe. Okay, what is the criteria for applicant's eligibility? So यहाँ पे there is a particular criteria which is required for eligibility of that applicant. The applicant must demonstrate the inability to seek bail from the jurisdiction where the FIR is filed. Okay, so that person, due to threats or threat of life or medical reasons or any other legitimate cause, if the court feels that there is a legitimate cause, then they can give the bail from the sessions court which is outside the jurisdiction where the FIR is filed. Okay, there should be a territorial connection or proximity between the accused and the court approach for bail to prevent abuse. ये abuse prevent करने के लिए there should be a proximity between accused and the court he has approached, right? So preventing abuse of relief. Okay, so already discussed this point. So we all know, overall the case is about matrimonial dispute where husband sought and obtained. He has also already obtained anticipatory bail from Karnataka Sessions Court, despite the FIR being filed in Rajasthan. Very interesting case. Okay, now some terminologies are there. Anticipatory bail, ये जो concept है वो क्या है? Anticipatory bail in India allows a person to seek protection from arrest for a non-bailable offence. All right, by applying to the court. If granted by the court, it prevents arrest for a specific period provided a certain conditions are met. Anticipatory bail जो है वो against arrest of non-bailable offence है, उसके against he can get the anticipatory bail. Okay, but court जो है वो applicant को एक particular restrictions और conditions उस पर met करना पड़ता है. वो conditions क्या है? Those conditions are, for example, if that particular person is economic offender, then he cannot leave the country. So the court may ask the accused person that you should submit your passport to the police so that you have no option but to stay in the country. All right, जाके कहाँ जाओगे? Non-bailable offense. Now let us look at what do you mean by non-bailable offense. Non-bailable offenses are serious crimes for which bail isn't automatically granted. Bail for these offenses depends on the discretion of the court. तो कोर्ट डिसाइड करता है कि whether you will get bail or not. And ये क्यों है? Because you have made a very serious crime, and those crime can be murder or some economic offending, etc. All right. Next topic is Ukrain crisis and its impact on the whole world. Now you need to understand certain terminologies. What is Minsk agreement? This Minsk agreement is discussed in the paper, so you need to understand first what is Minsk agreement. Now, when was this Minsk protocol? It was signed on September 5, 2014. Who were the parties involved in this? Ukraine was there, Russia, Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, leaders of France and Germany, self-proclaimed Donetsk People Republic DPR and LPR. Now, what is this agreement all about? This agreement is for the ceasefire and the withdrawal of the heavy weapons, prisoners release, self-government in Donbass, restoration of Ukraine government, control over the state border. So there was conflict between Russia and Ukraine over the region which is known as Donbass area. Alright, this is a part in Ukraine. So the Donetsk and Luhansk, these are areas, these are Russian-backed separatist control area, and these separatist control area are demanding freedom from Ukraine. They want independence from Ukraine. Russia is supporting these two, Donetsk and Luhansk. In 2014, Russia fully supported them, and due to this, Ukraine started the war against Donetsk and Luhansk. All right, in which Russia backed those two separatist control area. All right. So Eastern Ukraine separatists, pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk regions declared independence from Ukraine in 2014. Fighting between Russian-backed rebels and Ukraine military in this area has killed more than 10,000 people since April 2014. Alright, so how is the timeline? The Minsk Protocol was signed on September 5, 2014. Minsk 2 was signed on February 12, 2015. escalation. The tensions rose after even after Minsk Protocol was signed on February 12, 2015. Escalation was there. Tensions rose in early 2022. In February 21st, Russia officially recognized DPR and LPR. February on the next day, Russian President Vladimir Putin declared Minsk agreement void. He said, "What do you mean by agreement void? It does not hold. Though you have violated the agreement, so the clause and whatever the agreement we have made, it does not stand, and we are not going to act according to the agreements or the protocols which are decided in that agreements." And due to this, after 2 days, February 24, Russia invaded Ukraine. All right. So, what was the purpose of this Minsk agreement? The purpose was to resolve the conflict in Donbass peacefully, establish ceasefire, and grant self-government to certain areas. Now, what was the reason of escalation? Rising tension between Russia and Ukraine, Russia's recognition of separatist region, leading to the collapse of Minsk agreement, according to Putin. Now, what is the location? It is signed in Minsk, Belarus, and conflict zone Donbass region in Ukraine. All right. So, what is this article about? This this writer is Russia's ambassador to India. All right. So you have to know who this writer is. Denis Alipov. Alipov is a writer in Russia's ambassador to India. The Russian ambassador highlights that the international order, often controlled by the global north, lacks clear rules and serves their interest. What do you mean by global north? That means United States of America and Russia. That means global north. In the case of Ukraine, the ambassador accuses the new leadership of collaborating with neo-Nazi groups, leading to terror campaigns and ethnic polarization. So this author claims, or he accuses the new leadership of the Ukraine. They say that neo-Nazi groups, the Ukraine was involved in the neo-Nazi groups. It led to terror camps and ethnic polarization. And neo-Nazi groups is nothing but white supremacist. According to the ambassador, the Crimea's decision to join Russia in 2014 via referendum was justified, but it went against the US interest. So that was the reason US started taking interest in the this war, Ukraine and Russia war. The West interference in Ukraine targeting Russia contributed to the civil war, especially in regions like Donetsk and Luhansk, as we saw. Efforts like Minsk agreement failed due to the Western support for Ukraine's military buildup. So, United States, after the Crimea's decision to join Russia, West supported the Ukraine's military, which led to the Russia's military involvement, which Russia claims was justified under the Article 51 of the Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. What is the Article 51 of the Chapter 7 of the UN Charter? That any country, if it is under the threat, and if United Nations Security Council is not able to maintain the peace, then any country has the innate right to defend itself. That is the reason that Russia claims was justified. Alright, that is why the Russia's military involvement was justified according to Russia. The ambassador citizens of the West enrolled in Ukraine, citing it an example of a failed social engineering and neo-colonialism. What is neo-colonialism? It means that neo means new, means new era, recent colonialism. United States and Russia, these people are ruling the underdeveloped countries or developing countries. They are still interfering in those countries, and they are depriving them of what you can say the independence. All right. So the ambassador warns against the notion of a rules-based order, arguing that it is designed to favor the wealthy North and opposes universal international law. So that wealthy North, United States and Russia, they are making the laws which favor them. All right. So these laws oppose the universal international law. In overall essence, the ambassador believes that the Western interference in Ukraine fueled the conflict. So United States interference in Ukraine, it fueled the conflict of the Ukraine and Russia war, and highlights the importance of understanding the situation beyond superficial narratives. So it is a good article, and if you have the understanding of this article, you can really write great topics and points in mains exam as well as in interview also. You can speak pretty clearly. Now we have already seen this. What is a neocolonialism? Neocolonialism is a modern form of indirect control where powerful nations maintain influence over less developed countries through economic, cultural, and political means, perpetuating the inequality and hindering the sovereignty and independence of the development of the affected nations. So, control is through economic, cultural, and political means, and it hinders the sovereignty and independence of the developing countries like India. All right. Let us look more and in-depth understanding of the Article 51 of the Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. It says it outlines the inherent right of self-defense that countries have in the event of an armed attack. States that the nation possesses the right to defend themselves individually or collectively against the armed attacks until the Security Council takes the necessary measures to maintain the international peace and security. Provided if United Nations Security Council fails to take necessary measures to maintain international peace and security, then there is an inherent right of self-defense of every country to defend itself. All right. Next topic is Jammu Kashmir journalist bail. Okay. Now this name of this journalist is Fawad Shah, a journalist founder of Kashmir Wala news portal. Now what is this all about? He was granted bail by High Court in the case related to charges under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and certain sections of the Indian Penal Code. Now these charges were about something that allegedly happened 11 years ago. The court found that investigating agency did not have enough evidence to prove that, and this guy encouraged people to take up arm against the government. So basically, they released this guy because there is no concrete evidence against this guy. The court said that when the investigating agency arrests someone under this serious unlawful activities prevention act, and they must prove that the person poses a clear and present danger to the society. What is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act? It is an Indian anti-terrorism law, in short. What is the aim of this law? It prevents unlawful activities that pose threat to the India's integrity and sovereignty. Okay. It provides measures to deal with terrorist activities, associations, and individuals involved in such terrorist acts. The law allows the banning of terrorist organizations, stringent punishment for terrorism-related offences, and the detention of the suspects. However, it has faced criticism for the potential misuse, including concerns about infringement on the civil liberties and human rights. Alright, so this is self-explanatory. Now, next topic is governor's role in passing bills. Okay. Now, this article is all about the constitutional provision, specifically of the Article 200 of the Indian Constitution. What is the Article 200 of the Indian Constitution? It is about the powers of the governor regarding granting the assent to the bill which is passed by the state legislature. Now, there are certain options that the governor can do when the bill is presented to him. The first is either he can grant the assent to the bill, then the bill becomes the law. He can withhold the assent, return the bill for reconsideration, or reserve the bill for the president's consideration. Now, what is the ambiguity and what is the issue here? Why are there three states, Kerala, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu, and they are independently going to Supreme Court for against their own respective governors? What is the reason? The article includes provisions stating that the governor may, as soon as possible, return non-money bills for reconsideration by the state legislature. But the trouble is, it lacks the specific time frame, and that is why it allows the governors to indefinitely sit on the bills, withholding bills. Now, it certainly causes conflicts between the elected governments and the governor's office. Now, exercise of discretion. While the governors have the discretion to grant assent, this should be exercised within the constitutional limits and not based on the personal preference. So, this is uh, withholding assent is not a personal preference. Okay, so Article 200 uses the word shall. That means it implies a mandatory tone regarding the governor action. Now, what is the Supreme Court's role? Now, Supreme Court is currently examining the issue based on petitions from several states like Kerala, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu. The states argue. What is this argument of the states? That the governor's indefinite withholding of the bills is causing halt in the administrative processes and creating an adversarial atmosphere with the elected government. Now, what is the legal precedent for this? The Supreme Court previously discussed the governor's role in returning the bill for reconsideration, focusing that governor cannot indefinitely withhold assent and must return bills with recommendations or amendments. Now, if the bill is passed with or without amendment again is sent back to the governor, then the governor has no option but to give assent to the bill. That is important. Now, what is Supreme Court's potential action? What can Supreme Court do in such cases? Because this Kerala, Telangana, and three states coming against the governor is the Supreme Court has taken this issue pretty seriously. The Supreme Court is considering whether it can set a timeline for governors to give assent to bills, which would essentially determine if it can impose limitations on constitutional offices' exercise of powers. But the interesting thing is that governor cannot directly participate in such cases before the Supreme Court. So the notices are usually issued to the secretary of the governor in these disputes. So this case raises a crucial question about the boundaries of the governor's powers concerning the assent to the bills passed by state legislatures, and Supreme Court is being called upon to resolve the issue. All right. I hope you have marked this article particularly, and you can read it and reread it this article because it is explained beautifully. What do you mean by withholding assent? It means refuse to give. In this case, the bill cannot become the law. What is Article 200? It gives the power to governors to grant assent, withhold assent, or reserve the bill for the president's consideration. Now, he may return the bill unless it's a money bill for reconsideration by the House. If passed again by the House or Houses with or without the amendment, the governor shall not withhold the assent, and that means he has to give the assent to the bill. And bill becomes the law. Next topic, RBI's tightening of the lending norms for unsecured loan is a credit positive, says Moody's. Okay, now before reading this article, there are some terminologies that you need to understand. Let us look at those terminologies. Now, what are risk weights? Risk weights are used in banking to determine the amount of capital the banks need to set aside as a provision to cover the potential losses from different types of assets, loans, or investments. So, in short, what is risk weight? It is the amount of capital that banks need to set aside. Okay, you have to know this, that it is a amount of capital that banks need to set aside to cover the potential losses from different types of assets or loans. Now, these weights are assigned based on the perceived riskiness of the asset. Higher risk assets require the higher capital reserves, while the lower risk assets have the lower capital requirements. The concept aims to ensure that the banks maintain adequate capital in proportion to the risks they undertake. That is important. Now, what are the unsecured loans? Unsecured loans are the type of loans that are not backed by the collateral or assets. Usually, when you take a loan from bank, the loans are secured by the bank. All right. So those are secured loans, but unsecured loans are not backed by the collateral or assets. These loans are granted solely based on the borrower's creditworthiness and promise to repay. The credit cards and personal loans are common examples of unsecured loans. Since you don't give your house mortgage for credit card, do you? So that means that is a unsecured loans. Non-banking financial companies. Non-banking financial companies are institutions that offer banking services like loan advances, acquisitions of shares, stock, bonds, debentures, leasing, hire purchase, etc., but do not hold a banking license. They are an alternative source of credit financial services operating outside the traditional banking system. Now, the capital to risk weighted asset ratio CRAR is also related to risk weights. CRAR is a measure of bank's capital adequacy, expressing a bank's capital as a percentage of its risk weighted asset. It is self-explanatory. The ratio of what is the ratio किस चीज़ का रेशियो है कैपिटल टू कैपिटल एक है और उसका रिस्क वेटेड है उसका रेशियो जो है वो दैट मीन्स CRAR. ऑलराइट, व्हाट डज इट मीन? ये CRAR देखने के बाद व्हाट डू यू अंडरस्टैंड फ्रॉम दिस? द इट अगर ये इट tells us the financial institute's ability to absorb losses. So, in short, कितना दम है, लॉस सहन करने का कितना दम है उसमें, ये CRAR बताता है. It is the power of financial institute to ability to absorb loss arising from its risk taking activities. So a higher CRAR means अगर ज़्यादा ताकत है, ज़्यादा दम है, तो it has a better financial strength and ability. In short, okay. So in short, you can say अगर हट्टा कट्टा आदमी है और ये 4 फ्लोर से गिरता है तो he won't मतलब ज़्यादा उसको नहीं लगेगा. But that means if higher CRAR है, अगर लॉस भी होता है, then that financial strength will and it will have ability to withstand that potential loss. All right, now common equity tier 1 ratio. What does it represent? It represents the highest quality of bank capital and is a key measure of bank's financial strength. This is also one of the key measure of bank's financial strength. So if you need to look at that bank's strength, financial strength, then capital to risk weighted asset ratio CRAR and common equity tier 1 ratio has to be you have to look for these two factors. A higher common equity tier 1 ratio signifies a greater financial resilience and capacity to absorb losses. Alright, these terms are essential in understanding how regulatory measures and risk assessment in banking sector influence capital requirements, lending practices, and overall financial health of banks and financial institutions. Alright, I hope you have understood all these basic terminologies. Let us head on to the actual news. What is news? The RBI's move. What has RBI done? RBI has increased risk weights on unsecured personal loans, credit and card receivables, and non-banking financial institutions exposure by 25% to 150%. So what is the aim of RBI? It aims to make banks allocate higher capital for such loans, improving their ability to absorb losses and make them more strong. Credit positive impact. Moody's views, what is Moody? Moody is a person here. Moody's is a institution. All right. Views that move as a credit positive as it compels lenders to set aside more capital, strengthening their losses absorbing capacity. Okay, it may also moderate their inclination for aggressive loan growth. So what do you mean by that? It may also moderate their inclination for aggressive loan growth. So if this is loss absorbing capacity अगर है, if you want to increase, you need to set aside more capital. अब ये capital जो है वो कहाँ से लाएंगे? एक ही pool में से लाएंगे. So there will be less amount of money left for lending. So that means aggressive loan growth will not be possible in such situation. Capital requirement. Estimates suggest that banking industry may need extra 84,000 crore in capital due to higher risk weights. So this is requirement. So if you want capital requirement, if you want this, then this is the requirement for this. The whole banking industry may need this extra. Rapid growth in unsecured loans. So the past 2-3 years, the unsecured lending segment comprises personal loan and all that. It has exceeding the overall credit growth of the banking sector in the past few years. All right. So this exposes financial institution to potential risk. Excessive growth. That means there is a potential risk of losing. Okay. So what will this will potential risk in the case of economic and interest rate fluctuations. Okay. Next is banking sector's resilience. In spite of the impact of these new norms, the banking sector's exposure to unsecured retail credit remains relatively small, around 10% of the total loans. Overall, the sector's capitalizations levels are historically high, with common equity tier 1 ratio of 13.9 as of March 2023. So, the banking sector's capitalizations levels are historically high. That means never before has been the common equity tier 1 ratio was of 13.9%. This is the highest yet. What do you mean by common equity tier 1 ratio? Let us revise. It means that represents highest quality of bank capital as a key measure of bank's financial strength. Higher is the common equity tier 1 ratio, signifies greater financial resilience and capacity to absorb losses. Now, this move by the RBI aims to enhance the financial stability by ensuring banks maintain adequate capital buffers to cover potential losses from unsecured loans. So, unsecured loans, that means from credit cards. If there is a potential loss from credit cards, then to cover all those things, RBI says that you have to enhance your financial stability, and which in turn would stabilize the Indian economy, and it will ultimately benefit the overall resilience of the banking sector. What do you mean by resilience? Resilience means strength not to sway away too much from the existing path. That means stability. Okay, now GDP growth may decline marginally to 6.3% in 2024. That's what Goldman Sachs report says. Okay. Now again we need to look at a few important points before diving into this topic. First is GDP growth. What is GDP, gross domestic product? It measures how much country's economy is expanding. What do you mean by expanding? Expanding means how many businesses are producing more and more services. If the overall businesses of the country are producing more and more goods and services, and which will lead to more jobs and better incomes. If the GDP growth is high, that means businesses are producing more. Inflation. What do you mean by inflation? It refers to the increasing the price of goods and services over time. What does it inflation means? 1990 में अगर मुझे अगर 10 rupees could get 10 chocolates, 2023 में the same chocolate I would get for 10 rupees, only I will get 2 chocolates. So that means the power of money has reduced. Alright, what do you mean by power of money has reduced? That means its value has reduced. What do you mean by value of the money has reduced? It means महागाई वाढली. That means महंगाई बढ़ गई. Alright, pretty simple. Now what is monetary policy? It is a strategy and actions taken by the central bank, like RBI in India, to control the supply of money and interest rates in the economy. Changes in the monetary policy can impact borrowing rates, investment and economic growth. So RBI has a policy and regulatory, it is a central bank in India. It controls the supply of money in the India's economy, and it controls this supply of money by repo rates and reverse repo rates, and this decides borrowing rates, investment and overall economic growth of the country. Now what is a current account deficit? It's a difference between what country spends on imports versus what it earns on imports. It's as simple as that. Capital inflows. Capital inflows refers to the money coming into country from overseas. It can include foreign investments, loans, purchases of goods and services from abroad. This is self-explanatory. Investment growth. The investment growth indicates how much businesses and individuals are spending on building factories, okay, buying equipments or making long-term investments. So what if this is the kind of investment, if the investment growth is more, then there will be increased production and economic capacity, and eventually it will lead to the economic expansion. Okay, next is supply shocks. These are the unexpected events that disrupt the normal flow of goods or services, such as sudden increase or decrease in the supply. This may happen by any natural calamity also. This can cause price fluctuation and impact the overall economy. Now, you can say supply shock. What do you mean by supply shock? Sudden war in the Ukraine and Russia, sudden war between Ukraine and Russia, sudden war between Hamas and Israel. This has uh, decreased the demand of the agrochemicals, and due to which Indian chemical market has um, uh, has has impacted pretty much. That means there is a lesser demand for agrochemical products. So the Indian exports in agrochemical has reduced drastically due to these wars. Understand, that is a supply shock. Fiscal consolidation refers to the government's efforts to manage its finances by reducing its budget deficit and controlling spending. It often involves measures to improve fiscal discipline and bringing stability to the economy. Core inflation. It excludes the core inflation excludes certain volatile items like food and energy prices and focuses on underlying inflation trend. It gives clearer picture of how prices are changing in the economy. Subsidies. This is what everybody knows what subsidy is. They are financial aid support given by the government for individual or business to reduce the cost of specific goods and services, aim to make these goods services more affordable for the customers. That is easy as fuck. Okay, the GDP growth projections. What does Goldman Sachs forecast GDP says? it will marginally decline to 6.3. That is all. Investment growth post elections, it expects to pick up the growth. Okay. Inflation expectations. Inflation is predicted to stay above the RBI's India target 4%. What is the target of the inflation in India by RBI? It is 4%. Now, monetary policy and interest rate. Those both expect to remain elevated. And the forecast, the RBI reduced rates by 50 basis points by early 2025. Current account deficits. The report suggests an increase in the current account deficit by 60 basis points to 1.9%. Economic resilience and outlook. The Indian policymakers managed challenges of supply shocks and high Fed funds rates through the various measures. The country's macroeconomic resilience led to its inclusion in GBI-EM Global Diversified Index, likely resulting in substantial passive inflows. Now, capital inflows and funding. India's regional supply chain diversification is expected to attract continued direct investment inflows. So, it is expected to attract continued direct investment inflows. In spite of global capital inflows potentially staying subdued in the high interest rate environment globally, the Goldman Sachs believes the current account deficit should be comfortably funded in the coming year. All right. And that concludes today's session. Thank you very much, everyone. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.